So they say that you can't have two captains on a ship, but where do company leaders turn to for guidance? The relationship between a CEO and its lead investor is very critical for the success of any startup hoping to disrupt their industry. And in this session, we're going to explore the dynamics of this partnership and the opportunities that it can unlock. So please give a warm welcome in conversation with Alex Konrad of Forbes, the Quizlet CEO, Matthew Glotzbach, and founding partner of Bloomberg Beta, Karin Klein.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We have a startup CEO and a startup investor here, and they're here to do a little group therapy session with you all on VC CEO do's and don'ts and relationship building. Maybe share a horror story or two. So if you guys don't mind, Matt, could you maybe tell us a little bit about Quizlet, and then Karin, you could tell us a little bit about Bloomberg Beta, and then we'll jump into the good stuff?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks. Happy to be here. My name is Matt Glotzbach, CEO of Quizlet. Quizlet is a consumer learning company that helps people practice and master whatever it is they're trying to learn. We help over 50 million people study and master whatever it is they're trying to learn across kind of every age group and demographic. And Karin is not actually on my board or an investor in Quizlet. She's a last-minute upgrade from Fred Wilson, who unfortunately, hi Fred, hope you're listening.
And hope you're feeling better,
and
Fred.
hope you're feeling better. Fred was really sick and couldn't make the flight. But as I was joking backstage, this is all an elaborate ruse to actually get me connected with Karin. So we're going to talk shop afterwards. So.
And hello, everyone. I'm Karin Klein. I'm a founding partner of Bloomberg Beta. We're a seed and pre-seed stage fund backed by Bloomberg, and we focus on the future of work. And before starting Bloomberg Beta, I was at SoftBank for 10 years, and we were actually investors in Fred's former fund before he launched what he's up to today. So it is full circle.
There's a connection, yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly.
And I'm curious, just so we can tailor this to you all, by show of hands, how many of you are entrepreneurs or thinking of starting a business in the future? Okay,
Good.
so probably like a bit of a majority?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my first question is, Matt, you didn't start Quizlet, but your founder is still involved. You join, and I assume VCs played a big role in that hiring process. Can you tell us a bit about what that was like, and then sort of how you reset the relationship with your own founder, now colleague, and then these VCs who hired you but now aren't your boss?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So our founder, Andrew, started Quizlet when he was a 15-year-old high school student living in the Bay Area, so a classic Bay Area overachiever. Ran the company successfully for the better part of a decade, and then I actually joined the company about 3 years ago after they initially raised money. And as you said, I was in a lot of ways recruited by the venture investors who had put money in the A round, and they were an important part of that, of getting me to the company. First-time CEO, a long career in technology at Google and YouTube and other places. But it was really, the investors putting their confidence in me, candidly, to help bring me into this role. And obviously, Andrew and I spent a lot of time together in that courting process. I think we probably did that dance for 4 or 5 months before I ultimately joined on. And then it was an interesting transition because as I took the role as CEO, I had to change my perspective a little on the investors. I don't love the mental model. You'll hear some people talk about, well, your venture investors are your boss, or your board is your boss. I think that's a horrible model. The only thing that they have a similarity with your boss is that they technically can fire you. But if you think about your boss only as the person who can fire you, that's a pretty distorted relationship of a manager-managee relationship. So no, it's really been thinking about my venture investors and my board as a whole as advisors, as trusted partners who are there. We all have the same goal. We want to see Quizlet be very successful. And so trying to think of them in that way.
And I would say it's interesting to me the words that you used around trust and partnership. And when we invest in startups, we're really backing the founder and expecting that's the type of relationship we're going to build. And as part of that, the lens of changes in perspective. So they're trusting you to do what's best for the company. And you don't necessarily answer to them, like you said, anymore.
And we have a great relationship. We speak, frequently in different forums and whatnot. And I will say we've been lucky. We haven't had a major crisis yet that we've had to endure. So, ultimately the test is when the going gets rough, how do things go? But I'm confident that they'll be there and continue to have their trust. Any advice you have for me on when we inevitably will have some rough going? What should I expect from my venture investors?
Yes, I mean, any startup is going to have challenges along the way, so knock on wood, it's been great so far. I think it sounds like you're building the right relationships with the people that you're working with, and that's the most important thing. I'd say also communication, like making sure you have that in place. When's a good time to share that kind of news? It's really as soon as you hear it, as long as you have that kind of relationship with the people that you're working with. I'd say the times when it hasn't worked for us is when the founder keeps everything very close to the vest and they're calling you. I've had a few experiences where the founder will say, I'm running out of cash later this week. Can you wire money? And it's very hard to do anything at that stage.
Well, okay, but if I'm a founder and I'm full-time thinking about my business, what is the right amount of information that I should be sharing with investors or advisors that it's useful, but it's not sort of drowning them in minutia that they're realistically not qualified to even weigh in on, and at the same time not ending up in a situation where there is a surprise, like what is the right cadence, Karin, for you, and what cadence do you look for, Matt?
So it depends a little bit on the stage of the company. So the earlier stage companies, we don't actually even have board meetings. We think it's a waste of a founder's time because you end up putting together slideware and it just seems like you end up meeting with investors far too much. So instead what we suggest is that our founders put together a monthly memo and it just highlights the key statistics. And then what it does is it also highlights what you'd like from your VC for help. And one of the things I love about that strategy is a lot of times startup founders bring in a whole host of angels. They can send that same update to every investor, and as a result, they don't get 1,000 people checking in on them. And for those of you in the audience who are thinking what one of those looks like, we open sourced our operating manual, and as part of that, we have a sample monthly update. So,
and Matt, do you text your VCs or what? I do.
I have them all on speed dial and text, and you learn the right way to communicate with each one. Like some people are email people, some people are text, some people are phone. So that's important. Of figure out the best way to connect. These are all human beings. Figure out the way they want to connect. I got a good piece of advice early on from I think another CEO about the monthly memo. So we actually do a monthly sort of dashboard that we do in the form of just a slide or two, and we send it out to all of our board, our observers, kind of and like you said, you can send it more broadly. And then the other trick that I have is I have a reminder that in my calendar every 15 days or so, where if I haven't sent anything to the board, it reminds me to send them something, right? So just don't wait for them to pull information out of you. Share with them, but don't share too much. Every day, too much. Every week, maybe a little too much, depending on. And it can be everything from highlighting a win to noting a challenge to I sent a news article that I read that I thought was interesting about our space and said, hey, this is interesting, relates to us in this way. Let me know if you have any thoughts, right? So just keeping that drumbeat, which I find also keeps them very engaged in our business, which is really helpful.
And one of the things I love about your approach is also being very thoughtful about what each investor brings to the table, so you know who to check in with regarding when you have a challenging talent situation or when you need to win a big customer. And so I find the cadence kind of depends also on how actively involved or helpful the investor is to whatever challenge you're having at the time.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, you figure out pretty quickly the role that each one either is great at playing or likes to play. And the corollary is also really important. Which are the ones that don't want to play that role? Like, don't go to them for that, right? So yeah, it becomes pretty evident if you're having a good interaction, I think.
And I also don't like the idea of founders having to create a lot of work. So one of the things we've also volunteered, to the extent they want to take us up on it, is we'll sit in their Slack channel. So that's a good way to keep in the background as to what's happening.
So my guess is that a lot of people in the audience, if they're talking to VCs, the VCs haven't necessarily invested in them yet. Maybe they've met the VCs, maybe they're going to be fundraising, but it's not like the relationship is solidified yet. What do you think is the right amount of information to be sharing with interested parties who don't have that skin in the game yet, but who maybe are like friendly people who are like, I want to stay in the loop on what what you're doing. So what do you think is the right amount?
So I think it's the best thing that can be done is have the investors or people that you know speak about you, so you're not necessarily the one who's having to sell your company to the potential investor. It's always good when they hear it from trusted independent sources. And I sometimes worry a little bit about the founder who's spending too much time updating potential investors. I'm much more focused on the founder that's out there trying to sell business. So, the type of call I love to receive is or email or text is when it's one of my founders saying, will you meet with this other founder? I just met somebody who I think is exceptional and you should invest in them. That's the best type of intro I think you can get.
Yeah, I would. That's great advice, and I would echo that. I mean, I haven't done a ton of fundraising myself, but I think you can easily get carried away where you're spending all of your time courting potential would-be investors and not running the business. And at the end of the day, obviously, the investors are investing in people as well, but there's also they're not just investing in you as a person, they're investing in your business and your success and your ability to execute on that, right? So spend the majority of your time focused on your business, and then I think the right things will happen. You have to put in some work, there's no doubt about that, but the right things will happen. Some people, I think, too often get that kind of formula mixed.
Interesting. So I find entrepreneurs off the record will talk about the job sometimes feeling lonely, or they have to internalize challenges where you're not going to go out and tweet like, hey, we just had to fire somebody, or hey, we're having a hard time fundraising. I can
go on the record on that one.
Yeah,
the job is lonely. And it's so funny because everybody told me that before I took the job. And I've had successful positions, senior parts of organizations. But for me, the interesting thing is twofold. Number one is there's no off switch. And if all of you are like me in this way, which I bet you are, if you're starting a company or thinking about it, there's just no time when I'm in the last 3+ years that I've been able to sort of turn off and not think about Quizlet and the business and what needs to be done, et cetera. And so that takes some getting used to. The first 6 months were rough for that, of adjusting to that reality of being able to at least get a little disconnected. And I have I'm sure a lot more mental health to go in terms of figuring out how to at least turn the volume down, if not turn it off. And then the second part is the buck stops here, right? And that's not an arrogant statement, that's just a reality, which is, we've grown the company when I started from 30 people to now 130. And you look around the office and you're like, wow, all of these people are dependent on me to, pay their rent and feed their families, et cetera. And that's a weighty responsibility. There's nobody you get to go complain to about that. And it's hard to do that with your board as well, because that's another constituent that you feel like it's your job to make sure they're in line with you. So
I have a lot of empathy for you and for our founders. It is a really lonely and difficult job. It's not for the faint of heart. And what I would say is we try and be the investor that our founders can turn to when they have those challenges. And we try and be approachable and action-oriented and solution-minded and all those kind of great terms, but the reality is that's the kind of relationship we want to develop with our founders. I don't think every investor is like that, so people have to be really careful as founders. One of the best things, I think, another thing I'm very proud of is we've started a group called bunches for our founders. So it's peer groups. Right. Because I think it's wonderful you're all here today. I think finding people who are going through the same things as you are is going to be the most helpful for those kind of situations.
Yeah, I would echo that. The advice everyone gave me was like join a peer group, and actually I was 2 or 3 weeks on the job and went to USV's first my first CEO summit with them out in New York, and I met another entrepreneur in the network who happened to be on the same flight as me, completely different space, et cetera, and we hit it off, and now he's a guy that I go back to, he's a person that I can, share the good with and commiserate on the not so good, and so yeah, the peer group thing is real, and no matter what stage you are in your startup journey, like have those people that you can, just share with and kind of you get support from.
I think it's good for everybody. I mean, I personally have a peer group. They're unofficial, but there's certain people I turn to when it comes to hiring, other people when it comes to negotiating. Everyone should build their unofficial advisory board.
Would you rather an entrepreneur that you're meeting with give the full story, even if it maybe makes the company look a little lumpier? Like, do you give them credit for the radical transparency there, or do you think it's better to put your best face forward, and a VC will assume that maybe things are a little bit, more of a roller coaster than the slide might project?
No, it's always up and to the right. It's always up and to the right.
I think the good investors know that's not the case, and the reality is a friend of mine, Adam Grant, has done some research on this, and he cites in his book, Outliers, the example of Rufus Griscom going when he was raising money for Babel, and before that, and coming to the investors and saying, here's why you shouldn't invest. And there's something about putting out there what you think the challenges are and the fact that you've already thought about it that builds confidence and trust. It aligns you with the investor to figure out if the investor can actually help you navigate the path while you figure those challenges out. So I much rather have somebody who's really been thoughtful about their business than only the rosy picture.
And then I think another question, just with this audience in mind, if reaching VCs is still a little aspirational, do you think there is a good way to maybe build the relationship ahead of fundraising? Is that something where maybe you want to lay down some groundwork months ahead, or is that just annoying to someone as busy as you that people are hitting up your inbox?
It's absolutely a great idea if you have something that you can share with them. I mean, most of the time investors are pretty social people. We're at things like this. We're not kind of living back in our office, and so finding a way to connect with somebody when you don't need the money is a great idea. It's more just about finding the right balance of not overselling too prematurely. So I'd like to have started to build a relationship with somebody, so it's not like, hey, I'm raising money, we're closing next week. Instead, I get the chance to kind of see how their company is developed and actually get to see if it's a right fit. I mean, when you take money from somebody, it's usually going to be at least 5 to 10 years, maybe even more, especially because companies are waiting a little bit on going public. And so I think making sure you're picking the right partner is critical.
And I assume that before you became CEO of Quizlet, you knew VCs. They probably checked in on you a little bit as like a potential CEO for one of their portfolio, and then that's actually what happened, right? Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, the way I got connected to this role was through the investor and recruiting network, and it had some of those conversations. And I think it's from my side, it's important to just be really clear with what you want, right? And I don't know how that's viewed from the investor side, but hey, we went around and did a B round fundraising, and so we reached out and said, hey, we're going to be doing a fundraising in about 3 months. Would love to start having the conversation, just being really direct. Were you doing that though to preempt? Because I think a lot of times founders come in and they say, oh, in 3 months I'm going to be raising, and they're really quietly hoping that you'll preempt the round.
So truthfully, no, but then that ended up happening.
Okay,
so
good.
I would say I was too naive to know that I was supposed to be doing that because this was really my first round fundraising. But that is in fact what ended up happening. So maybe that's part of the new playbook. I don't know.
I would say as a founder or as a leader of a tech company, you're always fundraising. So wear the hat of this is your company, wear your like Sunil's wearing his Techstars hoodie, and just start evangelizing your business so that you develop the relationships with the investors.
Well, I'm
when
sure
you're
this
ready.
audience is going to be very receptive to evangelizing because they're here to meet people. So,
Thank
you know, you've got the right crowd. Thanks so much, everyone. We're out of time, but appreciate the insights.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.